Hey everyone, how's it going today? And welcome back to another update. So we have some really great news to share, and then we also have some not so good news to share. Maybe to just start off is because today's update is all going to be about the fourth stimulus package, specifically about the Build Back Better plan, and specifically about the package that has the social programs that involve putting money inside of our pockets that we just really particularly care about. So the not so good news, maybe to just start off on the spot, is that Joe Manchin has officially come out to speak this morning, if you are watching on release date, about his plans, which is probably means that it's going to be relevant over the next couple of days, even if you're watching this into the future. And the big idea is that he's pretty much just given an update that ever since he ended up making that announcement about how he was not going to support the fourth stimulus package, specifically the Build Back Better plan, the reconciliation bill, or the bill with social programs that we care about, ever since that ended up happening, they haven't really met up to speak about anything. In other words, is that they haven't really made any kind of mutual progress in terms of sitting down and trying to negotiate their differences. Now, with that being said, is that it does make somewhat of a logical sense, in the sense that because the last 2 weeks was technically the holidays, and as we know, Congress does like to take a lot of vacations, especially during probably the week that has the most number of holidays between Christmas, Hanukkah, all the other kinds of celebrations, New Year's Eve, Christmas Eve, and everything that's been going on. So they haven't really been talking as much about it since. Now, the bright and hopeful news is that what he has officially come out to talk is now officially giving answers about what he actually physically wants inside of the fourth stimulus package. Basically what this means is that we now have an answer about what we need to do if we want to please him, of course, because it doesn't mean we're going to agree, but if we want to please him, we actually have some perspective now about what he actually physically wants, and that's what I really want to go into detail in today's video. So we're going to get started, but as always, real fast, before we begin, as always, consider smashing the like button. If you guys enjoy videos like this, consider subscribing and hitting the bell. You guys can decide, but it is always greatly appreciated. And as always, feel free to comment any questions, personal thoughts, maybe especially by the very end of this video about what you think about the current situation, because it is a very controversial and very debated topic right now. So it is very interesting to hear. So with that being said, let's get this video started. So the not so good news, as most of you guys just heard, is that they essentially haven't really made as much mutual progress, so in terms of sitting down and trying to negotiate back and forth ever since the holidays have happened. Now, with that being said, again, as mentioned, is that it probably does make sense because during the holiday season they are on vacation, so they probably are not expected to do as much work per se. But the hopeful news is, as just mentioned, is that we do now officially have also word from Joe Manchin about what he physically wants, which is basically right here. And essentially what he's officially come out to speak is that we'll just say general news in general is that we now have a much better idea about what he currently wants. The not so good news, I suppose, to start, is that one of the things that he's now officially stated very clearly is that he's actually very much against a lot of the social programs. So this basically means it's the parts of the program that most of us probably actually genuinely really care about, such as about like putting money in our pockets. In this specific situation, the child tax credit. He's someone right now that's actually very much not in support of the child tax credit and really wants it to be removed, or at the very least, if we are able to keep it. So again, there is a chance right there. What he does want is for us to increase the requirements and lower the income caps. So what this basically means is to make it so that it's a program that's still there, but that it's going to be harder to physically get onto, and it's going to be very focused and targeted on very particular people that are actually in very particular need. And I think that's the big thing that he's really trying to go at there. Now, the biggest reason maybe to explain why he's actually, or what his logic to why he feels the way that he currently feels, is really because the biggest thing that's going on right now, and this is something that many other politicians also feel very, very similar about, especially on the Republican Party, is that they're very, very afraid of the inflation situation. And maybe to put very, very clear numbers like right here, the biggest thing is that right now at this current time, it is estimated that he's very, very afraid that if we end up including all of these programs, it's going to potentially cost about $4 trillion over the next 10 years. It's also going to potentially drive up prices very, very drastically. So why this is actually very, very particularly important is because imagine being in a situation where you're able to get a lot more money, which is a very, very good thing. But on his particular side, since he is not going to be getting money, because again, this is meant to help out the people in need, what it will do for a lot of people is that it's going to drive up the prices. So now what this basically means is that when you go outside, imagine everything that you typically buy on a day-to-day basis, but now having to pay maybe somewhere between 5, 10 to even maybe 20, something more than that percent more now for the same exact item. So in other words, is a typical meal that might typically cost about $12 will now bump to 15. Something that's 12 might bump to 16. And while this is technically food, you know, it does definitely add up, but it also expands to a lot of the more expensive things, such as like rent, utilities, bills. This is when we're talking about things that will potentially make a true difference in terms of like most people's normal everyday budget. And I think that's the big thing that he's very, very afraid of, combined with the current amount of debt that our country is currently going through. Now, one maybe important information about where this actually now goes is that there is actually one relative important date that's going to be coming up in 1 to 2 weeks, which is specifically, I believe, on Wednesday, January 12th of 2022. So, wow, we're still in 2022. Happy New Year, by the way, if you guys haven't heard already. But the big thing really about it is that on that particular date, we're going to be receiving brand new information about a report otherwise known as the Consumers Price Index Report. What this is essentially is that it's a report that gets released every once in a while that just basically shows the average price of everything inside of our country and how much everything costs. But what's also included inside of this is going to be the inflation rate. And the last time that we received this report, the inflation rate went up by, I believe, about 6.8%. So what this really means is that it's very, very high. And the significance of what this is that because right now Joe Manchin's biggest fear is about the inflation. So when we get that report, depending on what the actual inflation rate is probably going to impact how he basically feels or where the negotiations potentially go and his personal sentiments on the situation. In other words, what this means is that if we do end up seeing even greater inflation, it does mean that he's probably going to be even more strict and even more opposed to doing most of these stimulus programs. Now, on the bright news is that if the inflation actually ends up lower, where maybe it turns out that it wasn't really that bad after all, then he's going to be a lot more likely to support it. Now, in terms of where do we exactly go from here is that the big thing is that until that report comes, the maybe bright news is that they are planning that they're hopefully able to, now that, you know, the holiday seasons is pretty much over more or less, that they're going to try to meet up once again. They want to sit down, and now that we do have clear answers about what Joe Manchin wants, they basically want to be able to sit down and come to some kind of compromise once again. Now, there is maybe also another bright news to share out there, and it's really about the fact that one of the biggest things, however, is that if they're not able to come to a compromise with Joe Manchin, one of the things that they can potentially do is to try to see if they can compromise with some of the Republicans, specifically, especially over the child tax credit. I know there's going to be a lot of people that might be wondering, well, you know, I mean, aren't those parties against each other? Why would they ever do that? And the big reason why is because you never know. And I think it's, for example, example, like one of the biggest things that he's obviously against is the child tax credit. But interestingly, there are actually many Republicans, interestingly enough, that actually do support the child tax credit. Probably the most prominent figure is going to be Mitt Romney. So Mitt Romney is an example of a Republican that actually is really, really much in favor and actually supports the child tax credit. So it's because of this reason, one of the hope. Now, ideally, if they're able to come to a compromise, that would be ideal. But one of the potential hopes and maybe potential backup plan afterwards to maybe consider that they're hoping to look into is that if something were to happen there, they're hoping that maybe as an alternative plan, they may be able to try to convince some of the Republicans to basically cover up for basically the fact that, you know, everything that's going on with the Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema situation, maybe they can get numbers elsewhere to try to account for that. And I think that's one of the big side goals that I think not a lot of people are talking about now, but that is actually very much going on behind the scenes right now. But the bright positive news is that when it comes to the fourth stimulus checks, it does mean that at this current time, it is still very, very much on the table. Child tax credit is definitely still very, very much on the table. It is very shaky, so we don't know what's going to happen. I would definitely go in with an open mind. But the idea is that at the very, very end of the day, I think the big idea is that they're at least still fighting for it. And if it was not to come inside of this package, it is very probable that they may actually end up trying to now extend to do a separate standalone bill, whether this involves child tax credit, whether this involves fourth stimulus checks, especially with the Omicron, especially with everything that's been happening over the last couple of weeks, super fast, which is wild. But that looks like it's probably going to be the more probable situation that's going to play out. Of course, because we are now starting the new year, there are still a lot of things that we don't know. But beyond this is that that's what I really wanted to share in today's update. So if you guys found that insightful and haven't done so, maybe consider smashing the like button, consider subscribing, hitting the bell as we hopefully get more information. The big thing is that we are currently going to be waiting for the report. We are going to be waiting for more information about when they actually decide to negotiate again, what actually happens in those negotiations, and how Congress, Biden, and Joe Manchin feels in the coming days based off of what's been going on basically all around the entire world right now. With that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, feel free to comment any questions, personal thoughts, predictions about anything, and hope to see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much again.